All right. So yesterday we live streamed the 150th anniversary of the Freedmen's Bank. It actually came out a few years ago, um, but it was good to just restream it because there's like a lot of nuggets in it. One of them was that there was two hearings. If you can see the screen, was in the Senate, United States Senate report of the Select Committee to investigate the Freedmen Savings and Trust Company. The other was a House committee. So I was able to like search and scour the damn internet for both the Senate committee hearing and the House committee hearing, and they were hard to find because a lot of the links were paywalled behind some stupid university. Um, but I was able to find public links. So that's what inspired the space. Let me switch to the New York Times article. There was a New York Times article that was published when after the failure of the Freedmen's Bank, the depositors worked on trying to get compensated for their loss of their deposits, right? $57 million, 100,000 of our freedmen ancestors had saved up, which is the equivalent of $1.3 trillion today. That's like $12 million per freedman. So if you think about how much work they put in, even after having our 40 acres and a mule denied, it's pretty dope, right? So check this out. Congress to be asked to reimburse the depositors in the Freedmen's Savings Bank the basis of the relations of the two races. This is unfortunately paywalled and there's no digitized version of it, but this was published August 22nd, 1875, a year after the Freedmen Bank was closed. And then I found this. Um, I like talking about how there was 2,000 freedmen in elected office, and if you go to um, the freedmen that were in Congress, they actually helped get a bill passed so that this could be investigated. So I'll pull that up because it's kind of cool that it took freedmen obviously to get this done. So um, I'll just go to each connection. So this is interesting because it talks about how Friedman, even though we were a Republican at the time, even how the Republicans dissed Friedman. Um, so clear institutional discrimination prevented African Americans from accruing more power in committees. Moreover, most black representatives had little access to party leaders who made committee assignments. Even the longest serving black member of the period, Joseph Rainey, gained little seniority despite serving 9 years in Congress. GOP leadership consistently assigned Rainey a rank lower than his seniority permitted. Most blatantly, Rainey was the last ranking Republican member on the newly created Select Committee on the Freedmen's Bank in the 44th Congress, which is what we're about to go through, despite having served in the House longer than any other member on the committee. No African American member during this era chaired any House standing committee. Blanche Bruce chaired two select committees in the Senate: the Select Committee to investigate the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company, and the Select Committee on Levees of the Mississippi River, which oversaw development of the river's delta region. Now, let me go to the other reference um, on the Freedmen Bank. Okay, so here we go. The near universal desire among black congressmen to reimburse African Americans who had lost their savings when the Freedmen's Bank collapsed illustrates how both the House and the Senate rebuffed the tireless efforts of black legislators. Congress established the Freedmen's Bank in 1865 to help newly freed slaves manage their money, but overextended loans and rampant corruption depleted the bank's 57 million in deposits, forcing it to close in 1874. Mismanagement and lack of resources continued after the bank's failure. Three commissioners were appointed to reimburse depositors, but were quickly criticized for failing to do so. The bank's failure had far reaching effects on black businesses that continued well into the late 1890s. Nearly every black member of Congress sponsored a bill to provide financial relief to African Americans who lost their savings when the Freedmen's Bank failed. Some were even depositors themselves. Sir, there is no one upon this floor who could feel a deeper interest in the subject than I feel, Joseph Rainey said in an 1875 speech. I myself have been a depositor in this bank and have incurred losses through it, and therefore I think that I have a right to have an opinion in this matter, not as it applies to myself, but to those who made the largest deposits in the bank. Opponents jeered at African American financial losses. Check this out. Viewing the bank's failure as a lesson to freedmen, arguing that reimbursing depositors would set dangerous precedent and must not be contemplated for the moment. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune patronizing us, basically. It will also be better that the Negroes acquire some self reliance. The natural reward of ignorance is deception, loss, and suffering. But the lesson in this case will have been lost if the government assumed the liabilities of the Freedmen's Bank. Now, imagine if we said that in 2008, after the financial crisis, where trillions of dollars were given to CEOs of banks and um, for them to stay afloat, right? Um, No one was a greater advocate for aiding depositors than Senator Blanche Bruce, who took the reins of the Select Committee to investigate the Freedmen's Saving and Trust Company in April 1879. Although Bruce's committee was unable to convince the Senate to reimburse depositors, Bruce used some of his own personal fortune, as well as his political clout, to raise funds to reimburse a small portion of depositors. Discrimination against At nearly every turn, African Americans in Congress during Reconstruction saw their legislative hopes routinely dashed by their white colleagues. When they could, African American representatives and senators advocated for reform legislation and provided firsthand accounts of civil rights abuses as a way to try and sway public opinion. There's actually another part in here. It has like a good quote on like statistics and how many bills they passed. Let me pull it up really quickly. African American congressmen focused on serving their constituents and, on average, introduced 15 bills during their individual careers, and around 70% of these were private bills, legislation intended for the specific benefit or relief of private individual or institution, meaning freedmen. Basically, they introduced 70% of the bills that these freedmen representatives in Congress introduced were for us. Um, So yeah, I wanted to bring that up because I thought that was an important statistic, especially when we're trying to get uh, people in office today. Now, the next thing I'm about to share is about Frederick Douglass and what he said to post the failure of the Freedmen's Bank. So we'll read through that, and then we'll get into the two hearings. There are hundreds of pages, so we won't be able to read through all of it today, but we'll read through some key parts, and then we'll do another space later this week where we continue it so we can keep breaking it down. Give me 1 second. Okay. So this is a message from Frederick Douglass. It's titled "To the Depositors of the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company." Notice published in the New National Era from Frederick Douglass upon the bank's failure. So, to the depositors of the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company. The recent legislation of Congress, and this is referring to the legislation that was introduced by the freedmen to get um, the depositors their money back, right? So this is what he's referring to. The recent legislation of Congress, so amending the charter of the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company as to place the institution upon a broader and firmer basis and give to its trustees a larger measure of discretion and control of its management, may be well enough made the occasion for a brief statement of facts and circumstances which have a bearing upon the legislation in question and upon the future existence and success of the Freedmen's Bank. It is very evident that Congress was animated in its legislation by a generous desire to conserve and strengthen an institution of known usefulness to the people in whose interest it was created, aka freedmen. In regard to the condition of this corporation, certain facts have already come to public knowledge through the publication of the report of Miss Meigs, the bank examiner. It is not necessary to disguise or explain away by false process the facts therein stated. It is known that on the 1st of January 1874, our liabilities exceeded our assets to the extent of $217,000. And it is also known that nothing has occurred since that time to materially diminish the space between these assets and liabilities, though it is due to state that several considerable loans, which were supposed at the time of the report was made to be bad, have turned out to be good loans. This deficit, now admitted and never denied by the undersigned, is very easily accounted for, and may serve a good purpose to state the cause of its existence. First, the managers of the Freedmen Savings and Trust Company have unfortunately endeavored to make the Freedmen's Bank compete with older and better established institutions of the kind in attracting and securing a large amount of deposits by holding out the inducement of larger percentage of interest than was warranted by the earnings of the bank. Of course, any corporation, nation, or family which spends more than it earns will in due time find its coffers exhausted. Second, another cause of this deficit of $200,000 is found in the fact that the former managers of the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company undertook to do too much work in another direction. Impressed as they were with the sense of the many benefits of saving institutions among the freedmen of the South, they were tempted into a sort of banking missionary movement. They started, established, and supported branches of the institution in remote places in southern states and where it was almost impossible that they could become speedily self-sustaining. Third, it cannot be doubted that a third cause has in large measure operated against the success of the Freedmen's Bank, and this cause happens to be one which it is most difficult to deal with, because it is inherent in the enterprise itself, and no wisdom which the managers of the bank can exercise can counteract or remove. This institution conspicuously and preeminently represents the idea of progress and the elevation of a people who are just now emerging from the ignorance, degradation, and destitution entailed upon them by more than 2 centuries of slavery. A people who are hated not because they have injured others, but because others have injured them. This feeling of caste, this race malignity, has naturally enough taken about the same offense at the Freedmen's Bank as it did at the existence of the Freedmen's Bureau. It is as desirous to destroy the former as it was to destroy the latter. Fourth, still another and greater source of evil has been the senseless runs made from time to time upon the bank. These have compelled the withdrawal of large sums of money from very safe and profitable investments, and have diverted the regular business of the bank from the making of money for its depositors to the work of obtaining the means of meeting the demands of these disastrous panics. The Freedmen's Bank has been subjected to no less than 3 of these raids during the last 18 months. The run made upon the bank by the failure of the J. Cook and Company cost us not less than $50,000 and required the withdrawal of $500,000 from safe and profitable investments. Add to these causes the general prostration of business and the great loss of confidence in all moneyed institutions, the disturbed condition of affairs, especially in the District of Columbia, where most of our loans have been made, and you will easily understand why the Freedmen's Bank is now under a heavy strain, and found it necessary to seek protection in the recent amendments to its charter. In respect to the future of the bank, some of the main sources of danger and ruin have been entirely removed. The trustees, governed by an increasing concern for the safety of their depositors rather than for large profits in the way of interest, have abandoned their unwise competition with others in the offer of a higher percentage of interest, and now resolve to pay only such a rate as the net earnings of the banks will warrant them in paying. They have also given up their wild and visionary schemes of banking and have abandoned the policy of establishing branches in remote corners of the country. They will now establish none where there is not very strong likelihood of their becoming self-sustaining. Not only have they discarded the policy of extension, they have adopted the policy of closing up as speedily as convenient and practicable the non-paying branches now in operation. They are not only for decreasing the number of branches, but also the number of employees and for reducing the salaries of their agents to the lowest point consistent with securing services of good men. With this retrenchment in expenses, with wise and vigorous management, and with the returning confidence of our people, it is believed that the Freedmen Savings and Trust Company, which has already been a powerful instrument in promoting the moral, social, and intellectual welfare of our people, will survive and flourish despite the machinations of its enemies. The effect of the legislation recently enacted upon the bank will naturally inspire confidence. It is indirectly a strong endorsement of the honesty and the ability of the trustees of the institution. It puts the destiny of the Freedmen Savings and Trust Company more completely than heretofore within their power and discretion. It devises an honest method of keeping the institution in continued and successful operation, while it at the same time it enables it to accomplish all the objects usually sought in suspension. It completely divorces the past from the present and future. It separates the old from the new and allows the dead past to bury its dead. It aims to protect the new depositor from all the mistakes and misfortunes connected with the management and bad condition of the bank. For the interest of the old depositors, it enables the trustees to hold their securities as long as may be necessary to reap the full amount of interest they are capable of drawing, and then allow the trustees to fill up the chasm which may exist between assets and liabilities. It puts in the power of the officers and agents of the Freedmen Savings and Trust Company to say with confidence and truth to all old depositor, give us time and we will pay you every dollar due you from the company. To the new depositors, it enables us to say with even more confidence, you may deposit with safety and profit. You are neither affected by past losses nor past mismanagement. Your money shall not be in any way mixed up with the old, nor taken to pay old debts. It shall be held as special and invested for your special benefit. In one aspect, this bill may be said to place the old bank in liquidation, while it at the same time creates a new one. It preserves the old body, but informs it with new life and gives it a better assurance of continued existence. What is now needed is wisdom, courage, skill, and determination. With these, Freedmen Savings and Trust Bank may be made not only a success in itself, but a grand means of success to the colored people of the South, to whom it has already taught important lessons of industry, economy, and saving. The history of civilization shows that no people can well rise to a high degree of mental or even moral excellence without wealth. A people uniformly poor and compelled to struggle for barely a physical existence will be dependent and despised by their neighbors, and will finally despise themselves. While it is impossible that every individual of any race shall be rich, and no man may be despised for merely being poor, yet no people can be respected which does not produce a wealthy class. Such a people will only be the hewers of wood and drawers of water, and will not rise a mere animal above a mere animal existence. The mission of the Freedmen's Bank is to show our people the road to a share of the wealth and well-being of the world. It has already done much to lift the race into respectability, and with their continued confidence and patient cooperation, it will continue to reflect credit upon the race and promote their welfare. It has long been a bitter complaint against the Freedmen's Bank that it withdrew money from distant localities and invested it here at the Capitol. The bill, which has now become a law, has removed all ground of complaint on this point. It provides that loans shall be made in the vicinity of the different branches, excuse me, so that the people who deposit their money may now feel assured that it will not be withdrawn to build up Washington, but will be employed to quicken industry and improve the condition of the country where it is collected. This feature of the bill alone goes far to recommend the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company to the confidence and favor of the colored people. Frederick Douglass, President, published in the New National Era, June 25th, 1874. So the next three things we're going to look at are from the actual hearings. One is about Sherman, uh, and about the bill being introduced. So let me switch screens really quickly. Um, Give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to read through the parts where it mentions like the Freedmen Bank. It's mainly coming from Mr. Sherman. So they ask, Mr. Stewart said, if other business, or actually, let me go to the first mention. Um, okay, here we go. Mr. Sherman, there is a bill. Oops, my bad. I went to the top. Went to the bottom end. Okay, Mr. Sherman, there is a bill on the calendar which I should like to have passed. It was reported with unanimity, um, unanimity, my bad, by the Committee of Finance. I refer to the bill S1138 to reimburse the depositor of the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company for losses incurred by the failure of said company. Mr. Cockbell, the senator from Kentucky, wanted to be here when that was considered. Mr. Sherman, will the senator send for him? Mr. Cockrell, I will see if he is in the room of the committee on appropriations. Let me fast forward because they go through a little back and forth in terms of getting to the bill. Um, Mr. Stewart, if other business is to go on, I shall insist on my motion to proceed with Senate Bill 3304. Mr. Sherman, I do not want to yield to Freedmen's Bank Bill, as the senator for Kentucky will be here in a moment. The President pro tempore, the motion of the senator from Nevada, Mr. Stewart, has priority. Mr. Sherman, all right then. So then gets to the next part. Freedmen Saving and Trust Company. Mr. Sherman, if the senator from Colorado, Mr. Teller, will allow me, I ask the unanimous consent of the Senate that we may proceed to consider and finish the bill S1138 to reimburse the depositor of the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company for losses incurred by the failure of said company. The senator from Kentucky, Mr. Beck, is present and says he is in favor of the bill. It will take but a moment, I think, to pass it. Mr. Teller, I have no objection unless it leads to debate. Mr. Sherman, if it leads to debate, or if any senator objects to the passage of the bill, modified as it is, I shall not press it now. Mr. Edmonds, we are in executive session, I believe, Mr. President, with open doors. Mr. Sherman, it can be done by unanimous consent. The President pro tempore, it creates great embarrassment in generalizing to have these irregular proceedings to open executive session or close executive session. If there be no objection, the chair will hold that there is unanimous consent given for the consideration of legislation business, and, and the senator from Ohio will be recognized. Mr. Edmonds, subject to a call for the regular order. The President pro tempore, subject to a call for the regular order, Mr. Sherman, I move that the Senate proceed to the consideration of the bill S 1138 to reimburse the depositors of the Freedmen Saving and Trust for the losses incurred by the failure of said company. By unanimous consent, the Senate, as in committee of the whole, proceed to consider the bill which had been reported from the Committee of Finance with amendments. The first amendment was in line 11, after the word representatives, to insert as in hereafter provided so as to read that the commissioner of the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company and his successors in office be and the same are hereby authorized and directed to pay or cause to be paid under such regulations as said commissioner with the approval of the Secretary of the Treasury shall prescribe to all the depositors of the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company whose accounts have been properly verified and balanced under existing laws or to their legal representatives as hereinafter provided a sum of money equal to the verified balances due said depositors from said company at the time of its failure, less the amount of dividends which have been or may be declared from the assets of said company. The amendment was agreed to. Mr. Edmonds, I should like to be informed a little about this bill. Who is the commissioner of the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company? Mr. Sherman, the comptroller of the currency is that officer. There was formerly an independent officer, Mr. Leopold, held the office, but those duties have been imposed on the comptroller of the currency from a number of years. Mr. Edmonds, so I suppose, but my doubt was whether the comptroller of the currency is the commissioner or whether the duty of the commissioner has merely been transferred to him. Mr. Sherman, it is so understood. The bill was framed in the Treasury Department. Mr. Beck, a report was made to us which shows the comptroller of the currency is the commissioner. It was made so by law. I have sent for the report and will get it in a few minutes. Mr. Edmonds, if so made by law, then the phraseology of the bill is probably right. But if the duties of the commissioner were merely transferred to him as comptroller of the currency, then the language of the bill does not appear to be adequate to the purpose. The first two lines of it are probably right, as they are because it takes in the commissioner of the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company and his successors in office, but the next provision is confined entirely to the action of the commissioner himself, and it depends upon the precise nature of his office. I do not want to interfere with the passage of the bill. Mr. Sherman, that duty was conferred upon him by law. Mr. Edmonds, the duties were conferred upon him but the point is as to the title. Mr. Sherman, the bill was prepared in the Treasury Department. Mr. Edmonds, the senator in charge of the bill says that the comptroller of the currency is the commissioner of the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company, so that I have nothing further to say on that point. The President pro tempore, the next amendment will be stated. The next amendment of the Committee on Finance was in line 16, after the word million, to strike out 200,000 and in line 26, after the representatives, to insert as hereinafter provided, so as to read, and for this purpose, the sum of $1 million or so, much thereof, as may be necessary, is hereby appropriated out of any money in the Treasury of the United States, not otherwise appropriated, said amount to be placed in the Treasury to the credit of said commissioner by the Secretary of the Treasury for the purposes in this act specified, but no part of the money hereby appropriated shall be paid to any assignee of any such depositors, and the benefit and relief provided by this act shall extend only to those depositors in whose favorable such balances have been provided properly verified, and to their heirs and legal representatives, as hereinafter provided. The amendment was agreed to. The next amendment was to add to the bill, no payment shall be made under the provisions of this act to any person without the commissioners being first satisfied that the person receiving the same is the original depositor, entitled to the same under the provisions of this act, or the widow, children, or grandchildren, if there be any. If not, then to the father or mother, if any, and if not, then to the brothers and sisters, and if any, and none other shall inherit. The money herein appropriated shall be applied only to the payment of the claims such persons in whole or in part of African descent whose accounts have been properly verified and balanced under existing laws. So they were pretty specific about who the money goes to. Mr. Edmonds, I should be glad to be informed why this race distinction is made in the amendment. That's funny. They mad at it. If there was a lawful depositor is made in the amendment, if there was a lawful depositor who cannot prove that he or she in whole or in part was of African descent, excuse me, why should a discrimination be made against him? Damn, so they were arguing about this before the bill was even made into law. All right, so let me just reread that part because it's kind of deep. Mr. Edmonds, I should be glad to be informed why this race distinction is made in the amendment. If there was a lawful depositor who cannot prove that he or she, in whole or in part, was of African descent, why should a discrimination be made against him? Mr. Sherman, the answer is that the law itself, which created the institution, made the distinction. Yep, it said for freedmen and their descendants. Um, let's see. No one really is entitled to the benefits of the law, and no one was entitled to deposit money in the Freedmen's Bank by express provision, except he was of African descent. Mr. Edmonds. Then, in order to get rid of the race business, and yo, this is deep. You know what I mean? Like they're having this in a freaking Senate hearing. You know what I mean? Can nobody hate on us? Like they're very specific, and it's like all about getting the money back from the bank. So this is actually really great. Um, okay, so the answer is that the law itself, which created this institution, made the distinction. No one really is entitled to the benefits of the law, and no one was entitled to deposit money in the Freedmen's Bank by express provision, except he was of African descent. Mr. Edmonds. Then, in order to get rid of of the race business and still cover the point of the senator, so as to give the money only to those who were lawful depositors, I move to amend the amendment in line 34 by inserting before the word original the word lawful so that it will only cover those who were entitled to deposit in the bank. Then I'll move to strike out the words in line 40 in whole or in part of African descent. The president pro tempore, before submitting that question, the chair will ask the senator from Ohio whether the word commissioners at the end of line 32 should be in the singular or plural. Mr. Edmonds, it should be in the possessive case. Mr. Sherman, the amendment was prepared by the senator from Missouri, Mr. Vest. Mr. Edmonds, it is a mere misprint in point of punctu- punctuation. They over here babbling. It is printed in the plural commissioners. It is intended to be in the possessive case so as to read without the commissioner or the commissioners being first satisfied. Commissioner would be the best form of the word. It is a typographical mistake. The president pro tempore, the typographical change will be made. Mr. Sherman, as to the language of the original law, the senator from Kentucky, I think, has that before him. Mr. Beck, no, I think not. I sent for it, but received a general statement without the law. Mr. Sherman, the original act limited the benefits of the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company to persons of African descent. Mr. Edmonds, I take that for granted and accordingly move to reach that point of only paying the lawful depositors by putting in the word lawful before original. If that is agreed to, I shall then move to strike out the words in whole or in part of African descent, and that will give the lawful depositors who make proof the money. The president pro tempore. The amendment proposed by the senator from Vermont to amend to the amendment of the Committee on Finance will be stated. The secretary, at the beginning of line 34, insert the word lawful so as to read, with the commissioner being first satisfied that the person receiving the same is the lawful original depositor. The amendment to to the amendment was agreed to. Excuse me. The president pro tempore. The next amendment proposed by the senator from Vermont to the amendment of the committee will be stated. The secretary in line 40, after the word person, strike out the words in whole or in part of African descent so as to read the money herein appropriated be applied only to the payment of the claims of such persons whose accounts have been properly verified and balanced under existing law. Mr. Beck, I hope those words will not be stricken out, if for no other purpose than to make it perfectly certain what is the intention of the proposed law. The original act limited depositors to the persons of African descent, and or so did one or two amendments of that act which were afterwards made. Subsequently, a number of white men became depositors and ran the bank and ran it to destruction, which is at the bottom of all of the trouble we are in now. Yo, this is amazing. This is like mic drop. Like they're like so clear. They're like, yo, there was white men in the bank, and we're not gonna let y'all do this sneak game and put these. Yo, this is, that was Mr. Beck. That was great. Mr. Beck said that. I'm gonna read that again because it's so deep. Mr. Beck, I hope those words will not be stricken out, if for no other purpose than to make it perfectly certain what is the intention of the proposed law. The original act limited depositors to persons of African descent, and so did the one or two amendments of that act which were afterwards made. Subsequently, a number of white men made deposits. Made sorry. Subsequently, a number of white men became depositors and ran the bank and ran it to destruction, which is at the bottom of all the trouble we are in now. Or now in. Drop. Oh my goodness. That's so awesome. Okay. If the words in whole or in part of African descent be stricken out and the phrase lawful deposit retained, it will be a question whether the very men who brought all the trouble upon the bank, who were themselves the principal beneficiaries, while the other while the original colored depositors were ruined and only got 62% of the whole. Oh my goodness, they are not pulling punches. They are saying everything. Insist that they too, having balanced their books with 2/3 of the whole amount outstanding, shall be the principal beneficiaries. The committee were endeavoring to guard against that by inserting these words at the suggestion of Mr. Temholm himself, who is the commissioner as shown by his statement, so as to limit it strictly to the purpose of the original law and to the only persons to whom we are bound to make it good. Boom! The only reason why the United States is an equity bond to make good the deposits is because those colored people believed that it was a government institution managed by government officers and run for their benefit. Their money was deposited upon the faith of that, and as they have lost, none of them being very large depositors indeed, are all very perhaps $50 being away above the average, the white men should not by any construction or misconstruction of the law be entitled to set up their claims. We make it good to the colored people, and then we have done our duty. Boom! Mic drops on mic drops. Man, this is amazing. The bill, as amended, is drawn so as to meet the views of the commissioner, and the committee were very careful in endeavoring to limit it to its proper beneficiaries and to extend it no further. Striking out those words which have been inserted would beyond all question cause all the white depositors claim that they come in under the bill, which we did not intend should be the case. Boom! The president pro tempore. The question is on agreeing to the amendment of the senator from Vermont, Mr. Edmonds, to the amendment of the Committee on Finance. Mr. Hoare, I call for the regular order. Mr. Sherman, I have done my duty. Mr. Hoare, I waive the call. I understand there was to be a division, and I thought that would be in contravention of the spirit of the arrangement under which the bill was taken up. I withdraw the demand for the regular order. The President pro tempore, the question is on agreeing to the amendment proposed by the senator from Vermont to the amendment of the Committee on Finance. The amendment to the amendment was rejected. The amendment was as amended. Sorry, the amendment as amended was agreed to. The President pro tempore, the question is on concurring in the amendments made as in committee of the whole. Mr. Vance, Mr. President, I should like to inquire of the author of the bill what distinguishes from any other banking institution of the country. If we pay the deposit of the institution for the losses that they have incurred by the failure of the institution, why should we not pay all depositors of all other banking institutions chartered under the authority of the United States? So this is the part when they start hating on the fact that we're getting reimbursed for the plundering. And keep in mind, in 2008, they reimbursed all those stupid bank CEOs and for the trillions that they wasted, right? I confess, sir, that I can see no reason for it. And before I vote upon the bill, disposing over $1 million of money to make good the uh, def- defalcations, 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 never seen that word before, of the dishonest men connected with this institution, I should be glad to have a reason given to me for a vote in its favor. Mr. Sherman, that reason has been given so often to the senator in committee and the Senate that the senator will pardon me for not repeating it. The reasons have been given as growing out of the peculiar institution and the peculiar circumstances connected with the institution. It is not necessary to repeat them here. Mr. Vance, I have not received the answer to my question that I expected and hoped that I would get. The senator contents himself by saying that the reasons have been given so often in committee that he declines to give them publicly. They're like having a little hissy fit right now. This is crazy. Mr. Sherman, the senator does not quiet quote quick quite quote what I said. I said that I have been given so often in committee and in the Senate that it is not necessary to repeat them. When this subject was discussed on the side of the chamber and on this side, who gave the reasons why the bill should pass, although it would not be a good rule for us to pass all the depositors of broken national banks. Mr. Vance, I was not present when the discussion was had in the Senate. I was not aware that one had taken place. The peculiar circumstances seemed to be that colored people were the wards of the nation, I suppose, and that they were led to believe that this was a government institution managed by government officers, and that the faith of the government was pleaded to make good their deposits and to see that they were properly treated, etc. The kindest and the best thing that can be done with the colored race in this country is to teach them to depend upon themselves. The ward, excuse me, the ward business began at a very peculiar period. It is time that they should either be the wards of the nation or that they should be independent freemen, learning to depend upon themselves and not to depend upon the government as one or the other. And that goes back to what we were reading before when the senators were talking, the black senators, the black legislators in the House and the Senate were talking about them basically hating on um, paying things back to the depositors. As wards, it is assumed that the persons were so ignorant that they did not know the risk they were running when they deposited their money in a chartered institution, that they believed in their trusting and implicit ignorance that they were to be taken care of by the faith of this nation, of the nation, and that everything that had the government of the United States attached to it meant a solemn guarantee to them of their rights and privileges and property, etc. That has all gone by, sir, and at the same time that we are now asked, in consideration of their ignorant condition, their condition of um, in Intuit citizenship to make good all the losses incurred in this bank. They were, as freemen, thought to be wise enough and statesmen-like enough and freemen enough to entrust with their destinies of whole states in this country to take charge of the laws, the property, the rights, the liberties, and the civilization of my state, for one, and of many others, and were placed over the heads of the white people in those governments. If they were able and sufficiently enlightened to take charge of the destinies of a free, civilized commonwealth, surely they were able to deposit their money in a banking institution and to take the risk there like anyone else. Excuse me. Basically, he's hating uh, white people complain and they got FDIC insurance to hold them as wards whenever a defalcation of a bank is to be made good, and to hold them as enlightened and civilized freemen wherever a political purpose is to be maintained by giving them full charge of a whole state and its destinies. I think is entirely inconsistent. When this bill was introduced, it contained a general provision to make good all depositors who had not been satisfied by the assets of the bank. It turned out that a quiet number of those depositors were white people. Now this bill amended so as to strike them out, and were and we are absolutely to make a distinction in violation of the Constitution of the United States, which says that no distinction shall be made on account of race, color, or provisions, conditions of servitude. They trying to flip this on us back then. Yo, this is that white and I say so back then. Can y'all believe this? He literally just tried to use the amendments created for us in the Constitution against us in terms of getting our deposits back from the Freedmen's Bank. That is wild. Damn, these white people, they don't stop. They've been saying the same thing for 150 years. Um, all right, let's see. We made an account of race, color, or previous servitude, or sorry, we are to pay the colored man all that he was robbed of by the officers of this bank, and the white man is to look out for himself and gets nothing because he should have known better. Sir, the whole business is wrong. These colored people must learn to distinguish in their business risks just as the white people have learned to distinguish. They must learn the great truth that every man who calls himself a philanthropist and friend of the colored man is not necessarily so, and that the louder, in fact, he talks philanthropy and love of them, the more likely he is to steal what they entrust to him. They have that lesson to learn. If one is to be paid, I am in favor of paying the other. There is no justice in any other course. I'm dead. These white people is wilding back then. He's over here using the Constitution. keep keep in mind they didn't even want to pass the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Now they're trying to use them for white people right away to get them their money back. Oh man, he's basically saying black people got to learn to suffer the mismanagement of white people, or white people should get their money back too, right? Like basically, you can't just help freedmen who were the lawful depositors, right? You got to help everybody, even the illegal people who destroyed the bank, right? Um, let's see, where were we? Um, the President pro tempore, will the Senate concur in the amendment made as the committee of the whole? The amendments were concurred in. The bill was ordered to be engrossed for a third reading, and it was read for the third time. Mr. Vance, let us have the yeas and nays on the passage of the bill. Mr. Sherman, if the senator wants the yeas and nays, I would rather that the bill should go over until Monday. I'm afraid too many senators are absent. I hope the senator will withdraw the demand and let the bill take its course. Mr. Vance, I have no objection to withdrawing the demand for the yeas and nays. I suppose that a quorum was present. Mr. Sherman, I doubt very much whether there is a quorum. on account of the number of pairs. There is more there is more than a quorum present in the Senate, for I have counted, but on account of the pairs and so forth, there might be difficulty in getting a quorum on the call of the roll. The President pro tempore shall the bill pass. The bill was passed. Okay. So that was the Senate hearing on the Freedmen Bank bill for the getting the depositors their money back. And I'll be honest, I when I was reading through, I read through. Uh, when I searched, I put freed. I put a D at the end, and that gave me, um, a different set of notes, and I didn't get all the way to the bottom. So I was reading that for the first time, that back and forth between the senators about who deserves to be paid. So that was deep, and it was great to just like read that live. Um, Now I have the copies of the Freedmen's Bank and um, the Senate hearing and the House hearing. They're in the notes in the jumbotron. One of them is 200 pages. The other is 400 pages. So I mean, I've been reading for the last like 53 minutes. So I'm not going to read it all today. We could have another space where we go more into those two. Um, but I want to open it up for discussion so we can talk about what we just went through and what we just read and what we learned and what everybody kind of thinks. So I'm going to send out some mics to everybody. Feel free to come up. In the meantime, Inspire, what are your thoughts on the whole what we read so far today?
One of the things I kind of was taking some notes, but I'm just like a little floored that they actually had this conversation on the Senate floor.
Right.
But I know some people were going around actually on Twitter saying that they were
white people in the Freedmen's Bank. Yep.
In the Freedmen Banks, and I'm so glad that hearing clarified that, which I pretty much knew. Anybody that sits on the board is going to have some interest, can have some interest in in the institution.
Exactly.
But I'm so glad that they were having an argument on that.
Right.
But the fact that they were trying to, the people had already stole the money, and then they were trying to have them gain more money off of the reimbursement. Right. That is crazy. And but that's really great information. I want to know how I can look at that as well.
Yeah, all the links are in the jumbotron, so y'all could save it, download it, because these links are hard to find, and these are the only two copies I was able to find from the actual hearings. Everything else is paywalled by some like freaking university and all that BS. So download it. I'm gonna put it on Google Drive so we have our own backups and copies. But definitely go to the links and download them. Yeah, it's crazy. They were having these arguments back then, and it's good that they brought it up, and it's good that they argued and said, no, we know what the bill was made for and who the legal depositors were. It was Freedmen, and nobody else should have been depositing money in that bank. And they shouldn't, even though we should reimburse the Freedmen, those white people should not be reimbursed, and that shouldn't be changed um, from the bill. And I love that, because that's exactly what we're arguing about now. You know what I mean? Like that, like what, like literally the same conversation we're having 150 years later.
And the fact that when they talked about the reason why they're in this situation was
because that was hilarious. They literally said that. It's like, this is the reason we're here now.
But they just didn't address the crime.
Right.
Didn't address the consequences of the crime. It was the same thing that Obama did for the private banks. They did not address the crimes that were committed. They just bailed them out. And it's amazing. This really great piece of history, because we can actually argue that their failed policies created a failure then, and it also almost destituted the nation again from mishandling of these banks. Intentionally, they were taking advantage of poor people trying to buy homes. Right. And that is just amazing to me.
Yep. All acts of genocide, financial apartheid, right? And it's just amazing that this history is here because literally we can pull this up and argue this in any court of law if we needed to. Like, nope, look at the intent during the Senate hearing, what they were arguing about and what they were arguing for. Cherie, how you doing, Cherie? Good to see you. What are your thoughts?
Hey, what's up? What's up, Eric?
What
Hello. Clarity. How you doing, CJ? Everybody in the space. All I could think about, because I didn't hear the whole thing, so I'm definitely gonna go back and listen to the full space. But all I could think about is the chapter in Dr. Darity's book, From Here to Equality, called Seven Mystic Years or something like that. I think that was the name of it. And it talks about that time right after Reconstruction where, freedmen were getting elected to office and it looked like it was going to be good. Man, it was never a such time. I shout out to Dr. Darity for his optimism. I very much respect his work, but come on, man, we did not have a time of mysticism. Like they always were pillaging and finding different ways to rob us. So I'm not surprised at all that they would literally use the same amendments to try to recoup. I'm just not surprised at all. So I definitely want to look into this a little bit more. It's very interesting. Thank you, Eric.
Man, they flipped that so quick. They flipped that quick. Like, it didn't take them no time at all to try to say that same on white not say something. Like, you're discriminating against me because you're trying to help black people. Like, oh my goodness. Like, oh man. They inherited these arguments.
Yeah, and they were like, now they have to know. And it was like, we're going to teach you a lesson about being free.
Right.
It's your fault. Your money was stolen. Ain't that some crazy shit?
That was bold on the Senate floor. That was bold. And this is why, like, these people are just bold racists, you know what I mean? And when you look at how FDIC insurance came about, it was because white people complained that they kept having all these bank crashes and bank runs. And so they got FDIC insurance in like the 30s, and that's been existing ever since. And then even in, like I mentioned, in 2008, when the banks collapsed, they all got bailed out, right? And these were white institutions. So the fact that they're complaining that we needed to get repaid for the money that was stolen, it's not like the freedmen invested the money themselves and made poor investments. They deposit their money. These white trustees took the money, invested it in frivolous stocks and railroads and other.
They invested it in their own businesses.
In their own businesses.
If we do investigations, we'll find that even if the senators directly didn't benefit, those freedmen, those board members directly benefited, I guarantee.
Right. And I mean, like I said, these other two, I'll just at least pull up the screen so you can see it. But it's 257 pages and 411 pages. So they're like full reports on the Freedmen's Bank. So like we'll read through them at some point. Totally. I just want to give the introduction today. I didn't think it would be this long, to be honest. So so look at this. This is 411 pages. This is the full report that was done. But to read through all of it is going to take a minute. You know what I mean? So, and then the House one is 257 pages long. So it's going to take some time to go through it. So I'm going to host more spaces where we just go through important segments that is talking about freedmen and things like that. But I think today was great because we read through the actual hearing that got the bill into law for the actual hearing, or to actual pay back the depositors, even though it was never freaking followed through on, right? Let's see. CJ, what do you think about all of this? You there, CJ? Or let's go to Cherie in the meantime. Go for it, Cherie.
Yeah, I got a jet, but I just wanted to say this real quick because it just makes me think of the fact that they're sitting there having any type of congressional inquiry. They're having a discussion about it like I'm positive now that there is some type of audit where they know exactly where all of those dollars went, because this is a corporation. You know it is somewhere, and I'm even more emboldened by that. The fact that the lady that falsely accused Emmett Till, they found 50-year-old damn arrest warrant. You telling me there's not an audit somewhere where they don't know exactly where all those funds went? Of course it is. Of course it is. That's why they keep trying to take the conversation in a different direction. But again, thank you, Aaron, for the space. I'm gonna go back and listen to it. I gotta jet out. I'm gonna come back if y'all still here when I get done.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sheree. Definitely let me know what you think more. I think it's so amazing that we have this because, you're right. We're basically reliving all this over again, and they're using the same arguments. We have the data, and I'm sure in these 200 pages and the 400 pages and the other one is going to be how they use the money. One of them said one of the guys behind the bank, or that was a trustee of the bank, used money to cover losses for his bank, his personal bank, right? That he owned, not the Freedmen's Bank, but he was a trustee for the Freedmen's Bank and basically used money to cover his losses in his own company. And then they made a lot of investments in their friends and gave loans to friends and stuff like that. So they basically just used it as a personal piggy bank. Yep.
I just think that for them to take the argument from newly freed people to say that you're responsible for an institution that was developed federally to supposedly to support the newly freed people, but to say this is a lesson for them to learn, that is what is speaking volumes to me. Like, I cannot believe. Well, I mean, I can't believe it. But it's like, we gonna teach you, like, that is crazy to me. Like, I cannot get that out of my head right now. Like,
the arrogance of it.
This is a lesson for you to learn, for you free people. That is crazy. That it's your responsibility to investigate that. I'm floored.
Yeah, no. I mean, I didn't even want to read it. It was kind of making me upset reading it. You know what I mean? But it's like the proof is in the pudding. You know, in terms of what they were saying on the record, and it's very clear where the arguments were about and what the intentions were. JW, you got your hand up. What are your thoughts?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
To answer I Love Thoroughly's point, you just allow people freedom. And for decades, they were denied an education, definitely no financial literacy. And to then say that they're responsible for making decisions that they were not even completely informed or aware of, it's asinine, man. And it just goes to show how they will perpetually try to keep Black people in a state of bondage and perpetual servitude for them. And that's all I have right now.
Yeah, 100% right. And Frederick Douglass is quoted saying that the looting of the Freedmen's Bank was equivalent to another 10 years of slavery for the Negro man. So him being someone who emancipated himself from slavery, saying that the robbery of the Freedmen's Bank was akin to 10 years of slavery, you can trust his words because he'd been through slavery. You know what I mean? So I'm like, yeah. And this is the thing. When we looked at the numbers, so if you look at the Freedmen, the 40 acres promised and actually distributed to about 40,000 freedmen, that was around $400 million in 1865. That today would be worth $16 trillion, which would close the racial wealth gap. But then we got denied that, and then had the Freedmen's Bank, and you had 100,000 freedmen save up $57 million, which today is worth $1.3 trillion, which would be an average of 12 million per freedman that they saved up, right? Like, that's incredible post-emancipation. But then you think that was then taken after you didn't get the 40 acres in the mill, and you got that confiscated. Then you save up $1.3 trillion, and then that gets taken away. Of course, that's 10 years of additional slavery, right?
But that I'm speechless. I mean, like, is it the pull-up bootstrap shit right here?
Mm-hmm.
This is what we've gotten.
Mm-hmm. It's like even when we make the bootstraps out of nothing, right? Then we get robbed and they take the damn boots that we made, right? So it's like they won't let us win, right? So we got to just come back and get everything.
And you have to imagine them looking at that economic fire to win that those freedmen had.
Right. They were jealous. It was jealousy. Think about it. 100,000 freedmen saved up the equivalent of $12 million each. I don't even have $12 million. You know what I mean? And that was post-emancipation. So I'm like, I gotta step my weight up. Like they put in work post-emancipation. 12 million on average each. 100K freedmen. Like that's balling if you want to think about it. The average, if you look at all black banks today in America combined, it's around $1 billion in assets. They saved up $1.3 trillion post-emancipation, 9 years post-emancipation. So to think about the level, the magnitude of work they put in just such a brief period of time, all that wealth to be taken, and then the freedmen in Congress fighting to get those depositors their money back. We're seeing the argument about, well, who should get it? Should the swindlers get their money back, or should it just be for freedmen, right? And then just to see how clear it was who deserves the repair. Excuse me. And it goes to show, like, this money still needs to be repaid. It was never finished.
And it's never been repaid. That is crazy. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, y'all, but for people to come into this country and to call their people lazy.
Right. Exactly. And even, I know we go back and forth with the diaspora wars, but something you can't deny, you can look at, we have 42 million freedmen, right? Our annual GDP, our annual income is $2 trillion, right? So 42 million freedmen create $2 trillion worth of GDP every year. If you look at that compared to the entire continent of Africa, which has over 1 billion people in Africa, their GDP is $1 trillion. So we do twice the amount of work with a fraction of the population. So no one could tell us that we're lazy and we don't work hard or nothing.
And the crazy thing is, we still didn't give up.
Right. We never gave up. We didn't flee. Right. And that's what I love about us, in terms of our resilience and, why I love where we're fighting for in terms of reparations and reconstruction and, stopping our genocide, because we haven't given up. We still need to fight for stopping Freedmen genocide. And we're still trying to resurrect the Freedmen's Bank, the Freedmen's Bureau, Freedmen Schools, Freedmen Hospitals, right? And then in terms of our reparations, we got to get paid back our 16 trillion for the 40 acres and a mule. And we know that there's 93 million colonial Europeans that benefited from the Homestead Act, and they got 160 acres, right? So they got 4 times the amount of acres that we were denied, right? And then when you look at the amount of acres that we can be allotted, 10 acres per person, which in a 4-person family is 40 acres. We could be given our 10 acres each, as well as the reparations for the Freedmen's Bank, the 1.3 trillion, and the 40 acres, the 16 trillion from that. And then our 4 million ancestors, because the definition of reparations includes, the United Nations definition includes loss of earnings, as well as loss of earning potential, moral damage, and it says it has to be equivalent to the gravity, to the magnitude of the harm. And so our 4 million ancestors were valued at $4 billion in 1860, which is the equivalent of $230 trillion today. And if you combine the 40 acres, the Freedmen's Bank, and the value of our 4 million ancestors, basically the lost labor, the value of their labor and all of that, that's equivalent to $6 million per freedman at a bare minimum cost. Doesn't include the 1900s or the 2000s. All of this is from 1865 to 1874. So that was what was taken in that brief amount of time, that much money. So we're gonna get all that back. Um, every penny of it we're owed. Um, but yeah, let me see if CJ Willis is back. You there, CJ Willis? And also, if anybody else wants to come onto the stage, feel free to. Love to hear your thoughts on what we read through today.
Yo, yeah, man. This was I don't really have words. I mean, I think
Right.
it's wild because um I think we all kind of touched. We all kind of gravitated to one point. The whole idea of that not paying the money back was supposed to be some sort of lesson for us.
Right.
It's got me kind of speechless because it's just the fact that someone actually suggested that.
Mm-hmm. The arrogance.
It just I don't even know what to say, man. It's this whole thing is it's enlightening and enraging.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'll end on that.
I agree with you 100%. It was like reading the parts where they were fighting for that delineation was like strengthening and empowering, and then hearing the parts where they're like where the dude was like, "Screw you," like y'all should have learned, y'all need to learn better. Da, 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 da. Like that was disheartening and kind of disgusting, and like you could tell like that person had an evil heart, right? Um, and they were kind of just bitter about our success and jealous that we could even amass that amount of wealth. Um, and then like it was basically a two-faced argument. Basically, either don't pay the freedmen anything, or if you do pay them, you have to pay the white people too, who finesse their way into the bank. You know what I mean? So I love that there was at least someone there fighting for us in Congress, saying no, it's for freedmen, and that was the purpose of why the bank was created. Look at the legislation, and the purpose of paying back will be only to pay back freedmen.
And what was their money being deposited there for anyway, if not to swindle? But JW brought up a good point. As we covered, y'all, stop crying. But JW made a good point when he said that a lot of these people who had this financial promise that was really fighting for their generational life, they were illiterate because it was illegal for them to even educate at that point. And that speaks to the amazing ingenuity of the people at that time. But this is important, and it goes right along with lynching. As they were financially raping us, they were also lynching people who were trying to attain and gain. And I'm gonna land it there because I'm very emotional right now. So,
yeah, no, this is definitely heavy. Thank you, I love 30. Yeah, this is heavy. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I gotta laugh through the pain a lot of times. You know what I mean? Like because like when I'm reading it, I'm laughing because it's just so ridiculous, right? Like it's just like, can you believe that they are saying this? Like, you know what I mean? Like laugh to stop from crying. You know what I mean? It's kind of like just. It's almost like you know how they say it was written. It's like literally you can read it. It's like you like you can already imagine these arguments. We hear them today. So just to see them, back in 1874, 1876, is just uh, incredible, incredible. Even hearing what Frederick Douglass was saying, I love what he said about wealth and how he talked about. Let me pull that up again because that was a deep quote that I like. Um, Let me pull that quote up really quickly because he said something really deep about like what what happens when you achieve as a group of people. He says the history of civilization shows that no people can well rise to a high degree of mental or even moral excellence without wealth. A people uniformly poor and compelled to struggle for barely a physical existence will be dependent and despised by their neighbors and will finally despise themselves. While it is impossible that every individual of any race shall be rich, and no man be despised for merely being poor, yet no people can be respected which does not produce a wealthy class. Such a people will only be the hewers of wood and the drawers of water, and will not rise above a mere animal existence. The mission of the Freedmen's Bank is to show our people the road to a share of wealth and well being of the world. It has already done much to lift the race into respectability, and with their continued confidence and patient cooperation, it will continue to reflect credit upon the race and promote their welfare. Like, like that's such an important statement because that's why we're still looked in this way today, right? We're still uniformly poor and compelled to struggle for barely a physical existence as freedmen, right? And it's because we've been denied our 40 acres. We've been denied the repayment of the deposit from the Freedmen's Bank. And we never got the money, our share of the labor from the 48, sorry, from the uh, years of slavery that our 4 million ancestors, toiled. Um, and so we need all of that back, let alone the Homestead Act that propped up and gave bootstraps to the colonials, right? They got the Homestead Act, they got GI bills, they got, uh, redlining and FHA loans, um, all of that. So no one can tell us that we haven't lifted ourselves up by our bootstrap, and no one can tell us that we aren't owed for what we have accomplished and what was plundered. Um, any other thoughts from people that are listening that want to come up to speak, or from any of the speakers on stage before we start winding down? Okay, I'll give everyone on stage last thoughts. JW, any last thoughts before we get up out of here? You there, JW? If not, we'll go to CJ Willis. Any last thoughts, CJ Willis, before we get up out of here?
No, I just want to thank you for the space. This is one thing I did want to bring up was it reminds me of why like our ancestors, like our grandparents, our great grandparents didn't trust banks. Like they were burying money in the backyard and yards and stuff. Like my family, my dad used to talk about like his father like burying stuff in the backyard, like money and stuff. So yeah, I mean this was heavy. It was a lot. But I'm glad you did this, and I appreciate you doing this. Appreciate y'all hosting space, Eric, and I love. Thank you, and peace and reparations. Land on that.
Thank you for that, and you make a great point. When I was we used FNN Freedmen News Network to broadcast a bunch of episodes about the Freedmen's Bank, and in the one that was done by the Chicago Booth Review, they talk about an analysis that was done. They looked at where all the Freedmen Bank branches were, and if you compare the Freedmen population around those bank branches today, and whether they're banked or unbanked, most people are unbanked, and it's based on that history of us being harmed by the Freedmen's Bank. And then they compared the white population. The white population, they have no noticeable difference in terms of their bank, whether they're banked or not. But if you look at the areas around the Freedmen's Bank, the freedmen in those populations remain more unbanked at higher levels than in other places in the country. Um, so there is a direct line from the plundering of the Freedmen's Bank to our current unbanked numbers, as well as our fear of financial institutions because of what has been done to us. JW, go for it.
I appreciate the opportunity to listen in and to engage with all of you. And this is just another example of how they continue to try to keep us economically disadvantaged. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was a World War II veteran, and because he was black or Negro, he was not given a GI Bill.
Right.
So often our people have fought for this country and been denied adequate reparations. And it is my hope that my generation, our generation, and the generation following us will continue to fight and put pressure on this system and get what is owed to us. And on that, I'll land and say thank you for giving us this platform to speak and to find out what is going on behind the scenes.
Yes, you're definitely welcome, JW. I appreciate you being in the space and sharing your thoughts. Yeah, this was a really important thing for us to go over. Like I said, I was surprised to even hear about it because I've done all this studying on the Freedmen's Bank, and I was going back through the 150th anniversary on the Freedmen's Bank. We live streamed it on FNN yesterday, and they mentioned that there was a Senate hearing and a House hearing on the Freedmen's Bank failure, and I was like, "What?" So I went and tried to basically find it, and we read through a lot of it today, but we're going to read through the full, or read up through the introduction, I should say, the full Senate hearing and the House hearing. We'll still have to break down. It's like I said, 600 pages in total, so it's going to take us some time, and we'll probably focus on like the parts that are focused on Freedmen, and like I looked, there's like parts that mention Frederick Douglass and stuff like that. So we'll break it down over this month. But I think it's important that we even read through the hearing that established it, because that was just deep. They talked about, what we're owed and who it needs to be specifically paid to. Let's give it to I Love Clarity, and then we'll wind down.
I'm spent for the night, but I wanted to say, with all the research that's been behind the scenes with the lynchings, and then, you forget that there were, like I said, the financial lynching and rape that happened to our people. But we have to tie it all together. We have to make it real for us so that we can communicate what's real to others. So if we don't feel the emotional pain that our ancestors felt, we can't expect anybody else. The fight is real. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that so much. And yeah, you should be upset and you should feel the pain. That just shows that you're really connected to our freedmen ancestors. I mean, like I said, like some of the words coming out of my mouth was hard to say. You know what I mean? Like it was just like so disrespectful. So but it's important that we know the history, and we know what was said and what was recorded. And I mean, even just reading through and hearing how vindicated we are today because of what we need in terms of reparations, as well as the need for delineation and disaggregation. I mean, it's just powerful, and it just adds and bolsters our argument. So with that, I really appreciate all the listeners who came and listened through this space. We've been here for like an hour and a half. Thank you for your patience, man. I had to squint to read some of that text. Oh my goodness, like text is small as hell. I was like, what does that say? And they threw us some old words. It was like 2 old words. I was like, I ain't never heard that word before.
The ancestors knew they needed to do that, because I was crying, had to close the space and everything. So appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, I really appreciate all the speakers. Yeah, A Boogie, good to see you. Jesus Girl, Sav, I see you. Asun, I see you. Sincerely Black Love, I see you. Freedman Angel, I see you. Savage, Locksmith, Boss Hog, I see you. Appreciate all the speakers as well. JW, CJ Willis, and my amazing co-host, I Love Clarity. Really appreciate it. And it's important. I love how honest you were. It's like even the crying, like it's like let the emotions run. You know what I mean? It's a lot. It's a lot. But
I was fighting with the school board today about minority majority, so that's good. It was too much today.
Yeah, one on top of the other, right? So, but yeah, I really appreciate everybody coming. It was so important that we heard these words reverberate, and now like I said, we can strengthen our argument with this because no one could tell us it's not for us. And even when it comes to the repayment of the Freedmen's Bank, no one can say like even how they're trying to hijack the Freedmen's Bank, Janet Yellen and all of them, and trying to make it a BIPOC POC thing. It was very clear. Not even they didn't even want white people in the Freedmen's Bank. They was like, nope, nope, nope. They gonna try to finesse that. We want to make it perfectly clear. That's why it's in there. So we're on the right side of history, y'all. So we just got to keep putting in the work and getting the political power we need to change the outcomes for us. Reparations now, Freedmen Reconstruction, and genocide prevention. But again, thank you all for coming. Y'all have a great rest of y'all day. We'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern, and keep it going and breaking down these amazing spaces. So appreciate it, y'all. Peace out.